Hello and welcome to Bust and Beyond with your host Robin Hayhurst. In this podcast, Robin will introduce guests that have known failure and want to share their story about how they got through it and what happened next. This will make you learn how to see things from a new perspective and avoid making the same mistakes. Please welcome Robin Hayhurst.
Hello everybody and welcome to Bust and Beyond. I'm joined here today by Stuart Falconer, who is the co-founder of the OLLIE Foundation. Hello, Stuart.
Morning to you, Robin.
So this is a bit of a different episode because Bust and Beyond, I suppose, when I started out was about business failure and lessons learned. And it's kind of, I think, got bigger, or in my mind it has anyway. And it's really about, people's mental state and much more than just kind of failure and the positives that come out of that. And so Stuart's here to speak about something a bit different. So tell us about the OLLIE Foundation.
Yeah, so the OLLIE Foundation is a suicide prevention charity or suicide awareness. Sadly, my son took his own life 8 years now. He was 15, came completely out of the blue. It sort of made me, I felt like I had to learn as much as I could about the topic because it was such a shock. I didn't know much about it. And then as I learned more and more and more, I realised quite how prevalent suicide is in our society. So a lot of the charity's work is literally around spreading awareness, encouraging people to have conversations with people, because I think as a nation, we sort of historically have always been told to, stiff upper lip and all that. And I feel like people then are left to their own devices with managing their own health and well-being, and especially their mental health. And sometimes people can become overwhelmed with those thoughts. And if they don't talk about them, it becomes overwhelming. And sadly, people feel like there's no way out. So they choose the most permanent solution of all. So the charity is very much, even though it's primarily for young people, to prevent young people from feeling like that, it's for everyone. Everybody, I wouldn't say everybody, but like lots of people are affected by suicide. And, if we don't have that conversation, who does?
So have suicide rates gone up, do you know?
I wouldn't know. I'd say we're more aware of it. If you think about like society, I mean, you're obviously much older than I am, but, but we think back to the society in the olden days, suicide was a topic that had a lot of stigma attached to it. And people would look at it as like a secret. So it would never be talked about. I even now I hear of families that were affected by suicide and were told that their loved one died of a heart attack or something because the shame that was associated with it. And of course, suicide was a criminal offence in the 50s and it was only decriminalised, I think, in 61 or something. So there's all this like generational attitudes towards suicide that I'd say right now, it's, if you read the papers now, probably pretty guarantee you probably read one story about suicide in a paper at the moment. And sometimes even if you don't know, doesn't say the word suicide, there'll be a reference to the police are not looking for anyone in connection with his death, or there are no suspicious circumstances. That's a suicide.
Yeah, I mean, we had a pre-chat. I'd have a pre-chat to everybody who comes on. And you corrected my language around suicide because I used the phrase committed suicide. And I had never really thought of it, that it used to be a criminal act and therefore it was committing a crime.
Yeah.
And I totally see it's one of the few times when someone's corrected me rather than the kind of them, he, the, she, he, stuff, where you think, actually, that makes complete sense. I totally understand why that is not relevant and shouldn't be used now.
Yeah. Well, if you think about the amount of people that have never had a conversation about suicide, why would they know any different? And so then get these references that they would have only picked up from TV or from their own experiences. And even the way suicide is referenced in films and TV and things is pretty unrealistic. So actually, again, the whole point behind the charity and the whole point behind conversations like this is to open up and have a conversation about awareness and what it means and how it impacts on you, so that you never know, one person listening to this podcast, if they're concerned about someone, they maybe won't be so frightened about having a conversation. And even if they were to use the word committed in that context, they're at least starting a conversation. And in time, you think about what cancer was referred to in the 70s. Do you remember? It was referred to as the big C, a topic that people didn't want to talk about. And then now it's, I wouldn't say it's everywhere, but it's not a topic that we're frightened of anymore.
Yeah, I mean, in my journey with Bust and Beyond, it's come up a lot. Suicide has come up a lot and people feeling that bad. And I think it's, in our conversation, we had a quick chat about social media and how that affects. Everyone thinks everyone else is living a perfect life. And it's the same in business. You look at someone else's business and they're always doing better than you. Are they? That's just the way you see it. And it can be really daunting. to be out in a world where you think everyone else is successful and you don't feel successful. And the kind of rules around that, just on a business front, I think it's also relevant to teenagers and everything else, is you're most probably more successful and more highly thought of than you think you are. And those people that you're looking at from the outside aren't as successful or as highly thought of as you think they are. So, it's all within your head and how you approach these things.
Yeah. Well, I recently came to some conclusions myself because I'd had I wouldn't say a mental health challenge. Well, mental health challenge, yeah. I mean, I guess I had some subconscious behaviours that I was unaware of. And so I repeated patterns of behaviour that were probably unhelpful to me, and specifically around relationships and the way I communicated my needs and things. But the more I've learned about myself, the more I've realised that they were subconscious. And then therefore I can do something about it by learning around how to change my mindset. And actually, I take responsibility for my thoughts and feelings now in a way that I probably never used to in the past. And if I'm being honest with you, I would suggest that I probably had this view that I was a victim, that, that this happened to me. But actually, whether or not that's true or not, what is true is that I'm responsible for the way I react to it. So when I am finding myself in difficult moments, I realize that my brain is thinking, and thoughts aren't really real. We create those thoughts in our head and they can become overwhelming that way. But actually, if you view it slightly differently, they're not quite as overwhelming. And so my mental health was improved as a consequence of that. And if you don't mind, I'll give you a really quick example.
Give me a slow example if you like.
So I started meditating maybe a year or so ago, maybe a bit longer than that. And there's a counter on the app. So it tells you how many days in a row you meditate for. I think I got up to 40 the first time. Then I forgot the next day. I gave myself a bit of a hard time about it. So I started meditating the next day. I got up to 70 or 75 or something, and then forgot to do it again. I'd gone away for a weekend, so my routine had changed, and started to give myself a really hard time, because I really wanted to be, I liked seeing the counter go up. It really gave me a bit of a buzz. And then to go back to one was quite a bit of a knock. But then I thought about it and thought, well, I'm focusing on the one I didn't do, but actually I did 114 days out of 115. Then that's the positive part of it, that I may have missed one, but actually I meditated 114 days out of 115. And then it you sort of realize that we can all make problems so much bigger than what they are. And if you view it slightly differently, you can realize that actually it's not as bad as you thought it is. And actually it's a positive. So taking responsibility for my choices, and it sounds obvious, but I probably never did in the past, probably allowed things to happen to me rather than taking responsibility myself for my feelings, my emotions, and the choices I made.
Yeah, I think that's a game changer, really. We always look at we want perfection, and actually we will never get perfection. So you've got to learn to live with the fact that you're never going to be perfect and you're never going to get perfection. You can strive for it, and that's a really good thing. But I think controlling your mental approach, what's going on in your head is quite important. It's really difficult. And I often say with clients, look, there's this bill that you can't pay in about 3 months' time. But if you worry about it, you're just wasting your energy. What you've got to do is try and get out there and do something about it. And it's shockingly surprising how often a solution appears. Now, it's not because it's just appeared because it's appeared because you've worked towards it. But a solution does come. Whereas if you sit there and you go into panic mode, how can you actually run your business? How can you run your life? How can you carry on every day?
So there's two things on that. The first thing was for me learning about my own anxiety and where it came from. And I realized, I read a couple of books about it, and anxiety tends to come from one of two places. It's either regret, shame, guilt, embarrassment that will happen in the past, or you're overthinking or worrying about something that's going to happen in the future. And then realizing that actually, well, you can't change anything that's happened in the past, and you can't predict what's happened in the future, because if you could, you wouldn't be in this situation anyway. So which means that the only thing you can take responsibility for is the right here, right now. And so for us, this conversation is the only thing that really matters, because this is in the now. And the second thing, I think, in reference to your point about overwhelming problems and thinking about the bill to pay and stuff, is I'm aware that I've done this in the past, has had a goal in the future of something that I wanted to achieve, and it looks unachievable. It's too far away. I'm never going to get there. Don't see how that's going to work. So why bother? But then when you think about what I just said about the now and living in this particular moment, well, I can only take responsibility for what I do right now. So if I do have a plan to get there, then I've just got to slowly, each step on the journey is what I do today to get to the point where I get to. So actually the journey itself is the fulfilling part, is because every day you're taking a positive step towards achieving something. So even if you don't get there, every day is a positive step because that's something you're striving towards. And hopefully you think, well, if I continue to do that on a daily basis, like my meditation in a way, which was like the idea was to become more aware, calmer, I keep doing it. So every single day I keep on doing it and I get a bit closer towards the promised land. But you know what? It's just contentment that I'm on that pathway.
There's a really interesting book called Atomic Habits, which I've
read it.
Yeah, and it really is a game changer for me. So increments of 1% add up hugely, and 1% of 1% of 1%. So is a really kind of big number. So you don't have to kind of change your life overnight. That kind of persistence, that kind of trying to have those increments of 1% really work well.
Yeah. Every single little moment that you step towards that journey is a step forward. And surely that's the only thing that we can do, isn't it? Is step forward, work forward, move forward. And as soon as you think you've made it, I think that's probably where your problems start. I had a friend of mine when I said that I was going to see a therapist a while ago. I said, why do you have to go in to see a therapist to fix your problems? Do you know what I mean? It was like this throwaway statement that that's the only way that you could be, comfortable with yourself. Well, why wouldn't I? Because it's good to touch base and things. And actually, I'm constantly moving forward. I'm constantly trying to improve myself. And being able to speak to someone like impartial on, some stuff that's relevant to me is a really good way of opening my horizons and being confident that I am going in the right direction. I said also, if I wanted to lose weight, I wouldn't go to the gym just once, would I? I'd go again and again and again. And like you say, create a habit of going to the gym, which is actually more of a lifestyle choice as well, isn't it? So even if your goal is to lose weight, you may well lose weight, but then surely the goal is going to be to retain the condition you're in. So you keep going to the gym. I would have thought that would be the...
Well, that, and you're not going to lose, 10 pounds in one night. So it's just, if you're always heading towards the same goal, even if you kind of fail, so you don't get perfection every now and then, you're going to get there in the end. So it's such an important part. I mean, just going back to the kind of social media bit, and the role it plays, I think, in people's well-being. My daughters often kind of discuss about people and how they feel about them, or they've said something nasty to them. And my kind of reply normally is they're jealous. And they go, well, what are they jealous of? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be a real thing. They can be jealous that they think you're more beautiful than they are. You might be, you might not be. That doesn't matter. The fact they think you are is enough. They could be jealous because they think you're richer than they are. Yeah. They might be, you might not be, but, and that...
But it's all relative.
It's relative, yeah.
It's all relative. Everybody thinks they've got the prettiest wife.
Well, I have, but,
But actually, all we're saying, though, is that, we all have thoughts in our head, and sometimes those thoughts can be overwhelming. And when my son died, and it's actually, going back on the topic of mental health and suicide, when my son died, it took me into a place that I'd never been before. Mm. I'd never experienced a thought, feelings and thoughts like that. My parents had died years previously, and they paled significantly into insignificance. Didn't even touch the surface compared to the death of my son, which came out of the blue. And the feelings I had then were feelings I'd never experienced before. And so at that moment, they were like, geez, this is really intense, almost, overwhelming, or, it is overwhelming, and don't really know how to deal with them because I'd never been there before. And a lot of it, the thought process is, I just need to feel like the way I did before. I need to go back to feeling that way before, because at least then I had something that was familiar, which subsequently can be comforting in a way because you've experienced those thoughts before. Like when you have you receive bad news, you've got experience of it, so you know what it feels like. But this was on a scale that I couldn't even describe. And so for a number of months, I started thinking, I just want to go back to feeling the way I did before. No chance. There was no chance. And eventually realizing that, that person that I was has gone. I am no longer that person. Was a bit of a turning point for my recovery. I'm, always working towards recovery, but that was a really big turning point, was accepting that I was never going to be the same person again, accepting the death, accepting the change in my circumstances, which was out of my control. I wasn't responsible for what had happened. That happened to me and my family, but I was responsible for the way I responded to it. And it took a long time, but eventually, I think I've reached a point now where I feel content accepting the fact that I'm going to have bad days. I think sometimes when people have bad days, they themselves can become overwhelming, which is like, here we go again. But actually now I wouldn't say I welcome them, but when they happen, I accept and recognize that that's okay. And it should be okay, right? If I want to get sad and emotional about the loss of my son, and last week I went around my ex-wife's house with our other son, and we ended up watching a few videos or a couple of videos of the boys when they were toddlers. Didn't have a care in the world. It was lovely, and we laughed a lot at some of the interactions that we watched on the video, but that was followed by sadness. And wouldn't it be weird if that wasn't the case? And so, yeah, to be sad is understandable, and it is a healthy emotion. It's a difficult one, but it's still a healthy emotion to have, the sadness. So accepting that has been quite a bit of a turning point as well.
Looking from the outside, and I'll be honest with you, kind of speaking about this, was a bit difficult for me as a subject. So, but looking from the outside, losing a daughter, I've got daughters rather than, I haven't got sons, but to suicide, I really honestly can't think of anything worse. I can't think, I can understand losing someone in a car accident, and you can kind of, if only it didn't go out in the car, and if this, that, and the other. But suicide, I understand why. I'm absolutely in awe that you've got your life back together and you're moving forward. I find it amazingly strong to do that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I sometimes don't feel that way. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I think I just reached a point where I felt, well, I've still got a life to lead. My life needs to live. And I do a lot of volunteering with SOBS, which is a survivors of bereavement by suicide. So I facilitate a group of people that have all lost loved ones, whether it's, parents, children, siblings. And that's the one message that I want to sort of give people is hope. And you can see a lot of people, and I see a lot of people who are in survival mode. And that survival would be, it's painful for them because they're constantly thinking about the loss and the grief that's followed and associated with it. It's easy to see it from the outside looking in, is that, yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be that way. It doesn't mean that you can't be sad, but you can still do things. There are still things that you can do that are worthwhile, worth your time and enjoyable, and you can still have purpose and still have meaning. And yes, you can still be sad and you can still mourn the loss of your loved one. But why can't you mourn the loss of your loved one and go, was it white raft water rapping?
Yeah.
I can't even say it, let alone do it.
Whitewater rafting.
Yeah. Or in my case, I went on a cruise last year for the first time. Something I did on my own, which was quite frightening in a way, to go and do something like that on my own when I'd never done it before. And other things as well that I like to go to shows, going to London, go to the theatre. And a couple of times there have been some topics that have been a bit close, which triggered an emotion in me. But that's okay. It would be weird if it didn't.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I watch things sometimes that make me upset, but I feel good about it.
They're like the England rugby.
Yeah, often, yeah. I'm really into films. So, sometimes I watch a film and there's an upsetting ending or something like that. And I'm kind of, again, being careful I say, but mellowed by the sadness. Because it's just part of life, isn't it? And I think I look at my father, who I absolutely adored and lost 2 years ago. And there's a lot more joy in my thoughts about him now than sadness. But he was going to die. I mean, it was, I might have died first, but he was going to die, something accepted. And I think that's when, losing a child, even if I can understand losing a father to suicide must be awful as well, because you would feel really let down by them. I mean, you couldn't help but do that, whether that's right or wrong. I don't know what the advice on that is, but... Well,
it's interesting because the SOBS group that I attend as a facilitator, you do get people who have all lost various loved ones, whether it's a friend, a mother, a father, son, daughter, sibling. And all the experiences, although there are similarities between the two, there are similarities between all of them. And some of the feelings that come out of it. And so one of the first ones is guilt. Guilt is undoubtedly the number one feeling that people experience afterwards, which is, I should have done more. Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't I see something? And they put that on themselves because they can't believe that person found themselves in a position where they thought that the only alternative or the only option was for them to take their own lives. And so guilt is by far the number one thing. And that can stay with you for quite a long time. But then eventually the more you learn about the topic, the more you realize that these people, by and large, they don't want to die. They just don't want to be They just don't want to live with the feelings they've got at that moment in time. And because they don't talk about them, they can't see a way forward, all the things we've talked about, it would appear that they just, I can't live like this. I can't live with this feeling. Again, I don't think they want to die, but they just don't want to have those feelings. I think I'm getting off topic a bit, but yeah, going back to the feelings that people exhibit as a survivor, guilt always comes first on so many levels. Why didn't they come to me? And in my case, it was like, why did Morgan do this to me? I remember having that exact thought. Why did he do this to me? I would have thought that his love for me would have been enough, or my love for him, or the family's love for him, and vice versa. But no, I mean, that was my initial thought. But after a while, I thought, he didn't do this to me. A lot of the thoughts go through to what did I miss, and were there clues, and why didn't he tell me? And the little with high, and then you pick over it. Or I did for me and my partner and my ex-wife at the time. Literally picked over every conversation, even going back a couple of years previously where we remembered certain things and thought, was that a clue? Just as an example, when my eldest son passed his driving test, I remember saying to Morgan, you'll be next. He's like, well, no, I'm not going to learn to drive. And another time was, I think I was trying to explain to him what it was like to be a parent and say, one day you'll experience what it's like to be a parent and deal with these issues. And he says, well, I'm not going to be a parent. And you look back on that with hindsight and think, did he already know? Or I'd never explored those comments because they're quite innocuous in the bigger picture of things. But then with hindsight, and that's what you do, you pick over these conversations and pick over, was there a meaning there? Did he mean that? Or, why did that happen? And why did that, like I think before he died, he went through a lot of his possessions and sort of gave quite a lot away. And apparently that's quite a common trait amongst people as well. Sort of like a bit of closure for them anyway. And also that actually their personality could become a little bit more upbeat or a bit more happier, if that makes sense. It wasn't that Morgan was unhappy, but certainly in some cases, people could become happier because they've already made the decision. So subconscious, having made that decision, they're a bit lighter now, knowing that they're not going to feel the way that they have been.
So is it helpful to pick over these things? Does it have an outcome that is useful?
I think you just have to go through it. Not everybody does, but I think in my case, I just had to do it, which is why I actually searched up suicide on Google, spent a long time reading about it, trying to understand it, trying to understand his motivations behind it, all that stuff. But eventually I reached a point which was, there is only actually one person that can answer these questions and he's not around anymore. So I can only really come up with a solution that works for me. And so the conclusion I had that works for me was that I did the best I could under the circumstances. Had I known more, had I educated myself more, had there been more information available to me that I'd have absorbed, then maybe I could have had a very different conversation to Morgan than the ones I did. And that's probably more through ignorance. But, ask most parents and say, have you ever thought about your kids taking their own lives? 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, it'll be, well, no, that would never happen. And in fact, I remember once there was I was with my partner at the time and she was watching a documentary, it might have been Panorama or something like that, on suicide in young people. And she said, you should watch this. And I literally went, why would I want to watch that? My boys would never do that. And I genuinely felt that there was absolutely no, because I think maybe, probably assumed that people that took their own lives came from a certain background or had certain traits or, that what they experienced and exhibited was very different to the thoughts and feelings that my kids had. So there was a bit of ignorance around that topic as well. So I'm waffling a bit. Forgive me.
That's all right. No, this podcast is about talking about life, okay? And learning from things that happen that are really tragic or life-changing. I didn't set out for it to be that, but that's what it's ended up being. And I think I'm hoping that's of use to people that are listening. So, really anything around that. I was so lucky. The biggest loss I've had in my life is my father. Keep going on about it, but that was the biggest loss. And I'm so lucky in that. But also, he kind of prepared me for it because, the biggest kind of thing that happened to me in life was my company going bust. And I think it must have been a couple of years before he died. He sat me down and said, look, I just want you to know that I do not blame you for the company going bust. You really need to know this. I was complicit with every decision you made and I would have made exactly the same decision as you have. And I didn't have to say that. But he said that made such a big difference and that's the thing you haven't got. You haven't got this kind of benevolent kind of other side to someone taking their own life, because they haven't prepared you for the fact that it's not your fault. And I think it's, like I said to you earlier, it is such a big thing. I am absolutely amazed that people kind of can deal with it, can move forward. It is life-changing.
Well, it may be so, but you often read about cancer survivors as well. Lots of people who suffer from cancer, which is obviously a frightening position to be in. But again, I always get a bit annoyed in the papers when they talk about people's bravery, being brave in dealing with cancer. Whereas I feel like you don't really have a choice. Don't feel like I have a choice or had a choice. And I think, with cancer survivors, you've got a fight on your hands. You've got to embrace it. What's your alternative? You just sit back and allow the cancer to beat you? No, you get up and fight, because that's the only choice you've got. And part of the group, like I said, that I'm in as well, I think someone said, why do I choose to live? Why would I? I think she lost her partner and, very, very, sad circumstances. And I was just thinking, what's the point? Well, the point is you've still got a life to lead. Nothing else changes. You've still got a life to lead, and we're all going to suffer difficult moments. And okay, mine might be a very difficult one in the eyes of most people, but then cancer survivors, they've got a very difficult, challenge to deal with as well. But ultimately, that's their responsibility as well to fight it and live the best life.
It is, but I mean, some people choose not to fight, so it does happen, depend on your age and everything else. So but yeah, I get that, and I think. One of the things that's a great leveler or a great lifter, and it sounds really odd because but seeing people that you feel are worse off than yourself or in a worse situation, I think that's it makes me feel very happy and lucky. So, which is perhaps a bit unfair, but, I think that is a big thing. I've spent quite a bit of time in hospitals recently with various family members and watching other people they live in A&E. They literally, their life is so dysfunctional. They go from one drug to another, to going there to try and get drugs because they've run out of drugs, to, various police officers with various people in handcuffs. And you just look at life and think, oh my God.
I get that. I do. And you say like being more fortunate than people, but I still think, you still got to respond. Often it's not uncommon for like rich people to have like their own issues as well. That's like a throwaway flippant statement. But everyone can suffer from depression or anxiety. Everyone has challenges in their world which are overwhelming, depending on where they're at. One person's tragedy is someone else's picnic, I would have thought.
Oh, it absolutely is. And the kind of example that comes up a lot is, someone with anorexia, their next meal is the biggest stress thing in their life.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, it's a nothingness. It's not important. So depending on where you are in life and what you're doing. And I know people that are very wealthy who live a very stressful life because they have other problems. And I think some people allow other problems to fill that void as well.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. But that goes back to one of the first things I was saying is that we're responsible for the thoughts in our head.
Yeah.
And if we constantly think of a thought and make it out to be the worst possible thing in the world, that's going to be the worst thing in the world. That's going to be your overwhelming thought, and that can't be healthy. So being responsible for the way that you react to those challenges when they occur is the only way, as far as I'm concerned. And it sounds a bit patronizing. I don't mean it to be that way, because I think there are probably lots of people out there that think that they can't do it, that it can't, because that's their historical mindset. Certainly in my case, for a long time, when I had a lot of anxiety, grew up with anxiety really, and because I had it all my life, it became quite familiar. And because it was familiar, it was sort of comforting, if that makes sense, in a really bizarre way. Because then, I think, like, through my life, I kept thinking, I'm not good enough. This is, life isn't meant to be good for me. I'm not going to meet the right person. I'm not going to find the job I want. All these I'm not going to, is all these things that put me in a space where just didn't feel like life was worthwhile. But because it was so common in my life, I didn't share it with anyone, because why would you? I just assumed that was the way things were. For me, no one else would possibly feel like the way I do. And so, that was my life growing up. I don't feel like that now because, I can see now that I needed to work on myself. And I think we all, on levels, have to work on ourselves and constantly strive. And once you constantly strive, you get fulfillment and life is a little bit more content.
I keep on saying I agree. I do agree. I think that what you're describing really is the type of imposter syndrome. And it wasn't until, the last 3 years, I realised how crippling my imposter syndrome has been. It's probably stopped me from doing so much in life, stopped me from, but hey, I've woken up hopefully in time and, get on with it.
It was never too late.
No, it's absolutely never too late, and I'm kind of getting on with it, and I'm loving the journey. And I've still got imposter syndrome. I'll be honest. I think if you haven't got it, you're not normal.
You haven't lived, yeah. You haven't lived. Yeah. Go get imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need it. But I live outside my comfort zone all the time, and I enjoy living outside my comfort zone. And things that, and strange enough, if you do live outside your comfort zone, your area of comfort becomes a lot bigger.
Yeah, no, look, definitely. I mean, I learned as well and realised that people develop coping strategies. So you may well have a limiting belief, right? That I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, a fear of failure, all those negative connotations. And as a consequence of that, and it probably started in childhood, yeah? And as a consequence of that, you develop these coping strategies, which is the comfort zones that you're referring to. I am comfortable in my safe space. So I'll continue to live in my safe space because it protects me from all the dangers that occur outside. I can see that as clear as night as day. I don't think I ever thought about it before, but my coping strategies were, to do this, that, and the other. That they kept me in my head, kept me safe. But they didn't keep me safe because it didn't make me any happier. So actually, the thing that made me happier and give me more contentment, like you say, was to step out of my comfort zone and face on these challenges that would have appeared at some point to have been overwhelming. Oh, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. So I may as well not try. And I think, certainly in my childhood, a lot of my anxieties and insecurities surrounded this idea that I'm just not going to try. If I don't try, then I can't fail. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And even when it came to my exams, I've always been quite bright, even if I say so myself, but I really didn't achieve at school. I ended up with 2 O-levels. Got a master's now, by the way, just thought I'd throw that in there. But I only got 2 O-levels when I was at school, and I was in the top set all the way through, but I never really revised. And with hindsight, I look back and realised that, I was setting myself up to fail. If I don't try, then I will fail, but it'll be because I didn't try. There's my get out of jail free card. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I had convinced myself that that was the case, because if you try and try and try again, you might do it. But I didn't want to give myself that chance. And that's where I think, my life up until recently was really difficult, because it was emotionally difficult. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So another quick story, if you don't mind, Robin, then I'll back over to you. I remember being in the playground as a kid, and the girls are playing Kiss Chase. And they asked me if I wanted to play. And my head was saying, I'd love to play. I'd love to be chased. I'd love to be kissed. But actually, I said no, because what I was thinking was, what if I don't get chased? And what if I don't get kissed? Then that rejection will be too much. Therefore, I'll avoid it. It's unbelievable now when I look back at it and think, I was 8 years old when I was thinking like that. And so that became like my template for life to an extent. Don't try, don't risk anything, because that way you don't get hurt. Wow. Oh, that's quite profound, really, isn't it? So now I think, well, the worst that could happen. Got to take a risk, got to step out your comfort zone, do the things that you want to do. And it might be you don't like it, but you won't know if you don't try it.
I was lucky at school. I happened to not really. Well, I didn't really fit into any groups and ended up in what I call the outcast group. And I'm terrible with names, but I can tell you now: Richard Schwartz, Joe Can, Dennis Swen, and Matthew. I can't remember Matthew's surname. McCormack. Okay, so I think Matthew unfortunately passed away in his 20s, but I remember them, really, really well. And I'm terrible at names because they pulled me up. They were the kind of people that went into the chemist lab lunchtime and did extra chemistry, And I scraped 5 O-levels, but I would have got nothing, absolutely nothing. And if it wasn't for them, I got a B in chemistry, which, is like, but then I left the comfort of that kind of thing. I wanted to move on and went to another school, and I was rubbish. I was absolutely rubbish. And I really didn't get back to education until I was in my late 20s. And I did it on the basis, if I fail a year, I'll just give up. That's how I kind of got myself through it. If I fail a year, I'll give up. And I remember I got right through a course on site management, and then I got right through my degree, and it was the last year of the degree, trying to hand in my dissertation, and I hadn't quite finished it. And I just said to my head tutor, I said, look, should I just leave it a year? Should I just do it next year? Just this last year because, things are happening and, all the excuses I come up with. And he went, and this will mean I have to tick that box at the bottom. He went, don't be fucking stupid. I handed it in and I didn't get a first or anything like that, but I got an honours degree in construction management, and I actually learnt so much in doing it. And I kind of forgot I'd learned something. That was a really big thing. I forgot that I'd actually learned something. I just thought of it as a qualification I needed to get because I wanted to become chartered.
Yeah. You've actually just repeated my story. I was working in McDonald's up until the age of 25 or 26. And it's like, I reached a point which is, what am I doing? I'm not knocking McDonald's, but I suddenly couldn't see myself like working for the rest of my life in retail. It was literally that stark for me. And I went to university at the age of 26. And I remember the first year I chose psychology, but that's another story. And I thought I found it really a really difficult subject because there was no right or wrong answers, no black and white. It was all subjective. And I remember doing the exam, the coursework, and I just didn't think I was going to pass. I assumed that I was going to fail the first semester. So I applied for jobs where retail. I applied for a job as a customer services manager at Homebase at the age of 26 while I was waiting for the results of my first semester's exams. And when I got them back, I passed. I was through to the next semester. And I just made a conscious decision. Then I said, oh, well, I'm not going to quit now. The only reason I'm going to quit is if they kick me out or I fail. But I may as well keep going. And so I did. So I got my degree. And then subsequently, I went on to do a master's. And now I work for myself running my own consultancy. So, that's an example of just changing the way I thought about something. Fear of failure, don't want to try, et cetera. Well, I thought, I may as well try anyway. And here I am. So mirror stories. Congratulations to you. Hats off to you.
I think there's a lot of similar stories out there, and there's lots of people that have not even started the journey yet, and they're thinking about it, and qualifications, do you need them? No, but I'll tell you what, it's been really, really useful.
Like you, I'm pretty sure that the actual experience of going to university was a lesson in itself. And so for me, because the lectures you go to, you have to go and do your own research. You have to go and study, you have to take responsibility for your study program. It's not like school. And actually that taught me a lot. It was a really positive experience. It wasn't just about getting the qualification at the end. It was about the process of going to university and doing the exams and studying and revising and doing things, which was a conscious choice. I was a mature student, I guess, like you.
Yeah. Yeah. The company I was working for at the time, bless the cotton socks, said I was a site manager. And they said, yeah, degrees. We don't really need site managers with degrees. Very, very narrow thinking. So I had to take off the time's holiday. So that was quite a challenge.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it was when I ended up doing my interview for the Chartered Institute of Building, I was much better read than anyone on the panel. And we had a bit of an argument because they don't seem to be great supporters of residential house builders. And that's what I've done mainly. I've done commercial stuff as well. And one chap decided that, it was quite easy to build houses and, compared to doing commercial. And would I ever survive on a commercial site? Well, I'd done a couple of commercial sites, including a hospital. And I explained to him quite frankly, what I thought of that point of view. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to get in now. I didn't even get to sit down outside. They called me straight back in and went, yeah, you're in. And this guy was sitting a bit sheepishly in the corner. Because I had actually I was so confident. It gave me some confidence. That's what it did, I think, getting the degree.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? It's a confidence, again, when you think about it, is something you create yourself. It's in mind. And if you tell yourself you haven't got any confidence, guess what? You're not going to have any confidence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's been really good talking to you. I think we'll bring it to an end. How can people get involved or support your charity?
Go to the website, I guess, is the first port of call, www.theolliefoundation.org. And just for people's benefit, OLLIE is OLLIE. It's an acronym for One Life Lost is Enough. So if they go to the website, they will see a lot of the activities we do. We do lots of training, actually. So lots of online training that you can do to educate yourself on the topic of suicide and suicide prevention. Yeah, understanding some of the things that you can help people with. You could fundraise if you wanted to go and run the marathon. Good luck. There are lots of different things you could do. If you wanted to arrange a fundraising event, that would be great as well. I'm lucky enough in the sense that we now have a team of people that work with the charity. We've got a CEO and a few staff as well, and they're great at engaging with the community. So like, we're going to do lots of talks in schools. We'll do lots of talks. So maybe there's a group of people out there that would benefit from having one of our team come out there and deliver a talk to their group, whether it's kids, whether it's sports groups or the like. Ultimately it's about raising awareness. So if anybody wants some help in raising awareness in their community, then go to the website, contact us through the website.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And if you're listening, if you can hit follow, that means, we kind of get to tell you when the next one comes out. But also, if you can give us any feedback, I mean, is this stuff interesting for you? Is it the kind of stuff you want to listen to? Any feedback at all would be brilliant. Well, thanks, Stuart, for spending time with us today, and good luck with everything.
All right, mate. Thank you for your time. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Bust and Beyond with Robin Hayhurst. Be sure to tune in next time and visit his website at robinhayhurst.com.